Have you ever seen a pimple this big? This girl had one right on her face. She decided to pop it, but it started getting bigger and bigger. Suddenly a hair pops out of the pimple, and when she touches it, it turns out to be alive. The year is 1968. In a small town called Mill Valley, everyone is getting ready for Halloween. A girl named Stella is on her way home. Stella is into horror stories and even writes some of them herself. She is contacted over the radio by her friends, Chuck and Augie. They are going to get revenge on their bully Tommy. They don't even know where this urge will lead them. They walk with a bag of candy and see Tommy's car. One of the hooligans snatches the bag of candy from Chuck on the fly, but when he unwraps it, all he finds is dirty underwear. As the car stops, they start throwing eggs at it. He loses control of the car and drives into a fence. To Chuck's surprise, his sister Ruth gets out of the bully's car. They run away and the angry Tommy goes after them. At the drive-in theater, the team climbs into the car of a guy named Ramon to hide. Suddenly, the car is surrounded by Tommy and his friends, but there are too many people around, so they have to leave. Since the threat had passed, Stella suggests that Ramon have some fun and see a haunted house. They drive up to a gloomy mansion. Chuck says that teenagers used to hang out here, but after one of them went missing, the house was shut down. It was once owned by the Bellows family. They were the town's first residents and owned a paper mill. The doors of the house are locked, but Ramon easily opens the lock with Chuck's pen. Once inside the house, they tell the boy the story of Sarah Bellows, who was forbidden by her relatives to leave the house. Children from all over the town would run to hear her scary stories. Afterward, however, they all died under mysterious circumstances. Before the townspeople got to the girl to get revenge, Sarah hanged herself with her hair. Legend has it that if you come to the house after midnight and ask her to tell the story, it will be the last story you ever hear. The atmosphere within the abandoned house is eerie. Behind a closet, Ramon finds a secret door. After walking through the hallway and opening another lock, Stella is surprised to discover that they have managed to get into the basement where Sarah Bellows lived. On a dusty shelf, the girl finds a book. It contains scary stories that Sarah wrote in her own blood. Suddenly they find out that Tommy had come to the house and locked them in the room. Ruth pleads with them to not lock them in since her brother was part of the group, but he ends up locking her in with them. Once inside, the girl becomes caught up in a web. While the boys are trying to get out, Stella whispers for Sarah Bellows to tell her a story. Strange gooey darkness envelops the walls of the house and opens the room, giving them a way out. They don't understand who opened the door. Once out of the house, Ramon is annoyed to learn that Tommy has wrecked his car. Stella offers him a place to sleep in her basement. Once in her room, Stella opens a book by Sarah Bellows and starts reading. She finds a story called Harold, which, judging by the fresh blood, was written recently. This alarms the girl. What scares her, even more, is that the story is about Tommy. Tommy arrives home and his disgruntled mother asks him to get some eggs from the chicken coop. The scarecrow watches him. The boy enters the coop and darkness descends over the building. As he walks past the scarecrow, Tommy punches him and calls him Harold. Walking past it again, in place of the scarecrow, the lad finds an empty pole. It makes him uncomfortable. As he walks on, Tommy encounters the scarecrow, who starts walking in his direction. Finding a pitchfork, he stabs the creature with it, but it takes it away from him and in turn, hits Tommy. After getting out of the field and trying to get to the house, Tommy is horrified to realize that hay begins to fall out of his mouth and that the skin on his hands and face becomes deformed. Tommy turns into a scarecrow. Stella shows the story to Chuck and Augie and relates it to the fact that Tommy didn't come to school today. When they arrive at the cornfield, they see the scarecrow in Tommy's clothes. In fact, the girl believes that the story is described as a true story, but Ramon doesn't believe her. Stella decides the book is dangerous, so she returns it to Sarah Bellows' room. Ruth discovers a large pimple on her face that looks like a bite. Ramon comes to Stella's room and after a few minutes, she finds him reading the book of Sarah's scary stories he found on the table. She doesn't understand how this is possible, since she returned the book to its original location. After opening the book to a random page, they are horrified to see a story called The Big Joe begin to be written before their very eyes. Stella, terrified, tears out the pages, but the story continues to be written. She is shocked to find out that the main character in the story is Augie. Augie finds a stew in the refrigerator and intends to eat it for dinner. Stella tries to tell him not to eat anything, but the boy ignores her. Suddenly he eats something from the pot and pulls it out of his mouth and it turns out to be a thumb. He hears a voice ask, "Who took my thumb?" Augie runs away and locks himself in his room. A dead, rotting woman walks in with no thumb on her foot. Hearing her approach, the boy hides under the bed. The door opens, but nobody appears to be in the room. After almost getting out from under the bed, Augie tries to have a look at what's there, but the monster drags him by his feet under the bed right into the darkness. Stella and Ramon burst into the house. Pushing the bed aside, they see the boy's fingernail marks on the floor. Stella blames herself for what happened and Ramon tries to convince her that it isn't true. Chuck and Ruth, who come up to them, Can't believe what's happening either. Stella says that these stories are written every night. She thinks that something terrible is about to happen to everyone who was in the house that night. Ruth thinks that whatever is going on is just a ridiculous prank and leaves because she has to play in a musical tonight. The rest guys try to burn the book, but it doesn't burn. Stella questions what they really know about Sarah Bellows. The team goes to their local newspaper branch and starts looking into the archives. They learn that a year after the girl's suicide, all the other members of the Bellows family disappeared without a trace. After looking through the book, Stella discovers that they were also victims of the monsters in Sarah's story. Suddenly, one begins writing itself in front of them again. The story is called The Red Spot and the guys realize that it will be about Ruth. In the dressing room, she tries to cover up a creepy pimple, but it doesn't work. Going into the restroom, Ruth is horrified to see that it has grown even larger. Darkness thickens in the corners of the room. She sees something moving inside the pimple. Meanwhile, the team is running around the school looking for Ruth. The pimple bursts and spiders start climbing out from inside. Ruth screams and the bathroom light goes out. The kids find Ruth, who has gone crazy with fear. Stella sees a clot of darkness in the corner. When Ruth is taken to the hospital, the girl says she saw Sarah watching what was happening. Chuck is horrified to report that they are next. The next day, the team goes to the nursing home to visit Lulu, who worked as a maid at the Bellows house. She knew Sarah well until she was fired. Chuck tells them that he had a dream about a red room where a fat, pale woman was watching him. He fears that the dream will be used on him. After visiting Lulu, they learn that in fact, Sarah did not actually hang herself in the house, but in a mental institution, where they soon head. They ask for access to old patient files and one of the doctors tells them that they are kept in the red room. Chuck is terrified at the prospect of visiting the red room from his dream. Stella and Ramon say they will go there themselves and he can wait for them outside. Upon reaching the archives, they learn that Sarah Bellows was sent to a mental institution by her own family. Her doctor was her own brother Ephraim, who tortured Sarah under the guise of treating her. They also find a recording of Sarah's conversations with him. She swears she didn't do anything, but Ephraim doesn't believe her and electrocutes her. He tries to beat a confession out of her that she poisoned the children, but Sarah says she tried to save them. The weeping girl says that the children died because of water that was poisoned by mercury from the Bellows paper mill. Suddenly her voice becomes angry and she begins to talk about Chuck, who had a dream about the red room. Opening the book, Stella sees the story appear verbatim on paper. Chuck takes the elevator to the roof and reaches the other wing. He finds himself in an empty white hallway. Suddenly a siren sounds and red lights illuminate the hallway. A black shadow crawls along the wall. At the end of the hallway, Chuck sees a bloated, pale woman. He tries to run away from her, but she appears at the other end of the corridor. Soon Chuck sees her coming at him from every direction. She reaches him, hugs him, and engulfs him in herself. Stella and Ramon run into the hallway. On the floor, they find a pen, all that is left of Chuck. The frightened kids tell the sheriff everything that had happened, but he doesn't believe them. What's more, they leave Stella and Ramon at the station. As night falls, the sheriff sees that there is a new story in the book. He goes to Stella and Ramon to find out how they did it when suddenly the lights go out at the station. Stella screams that if there is a new story in the book, they are all going to die. Ramon comes to the conclusion that it is his turn. A smiling head falls out of the chimney, followed by other body parts. In front of the astonished sheriff, the monster collects itself and twists his neck. The creature throws the sheriff's corpse toward the cages where Stella and Ramon are being held. The monster tries to get to Ramon, but Stella manages to remove the keys from the sheriff's belt and sets them free. Stella runs to the Bellows house, and Ramon gets behind the wheel of a police car to detain and distract the monster. After the chase, he drives into a truck, trapping the monster between the hoods. It breaks free, tearing itself apart. Stella runs into the Bellows house, screaming at Sarah not to tell any more stories. She informs her that she knows Sarah's innocence in the children's deaths. Suddenly, the book disappears from Stella's hands and the house around her is lit up with a bright light. The book is left lying in the abandoned house, where Ramon runs in. He sees that the book is writing a story about Stella's haunted house. The boy starts running around the house looking for Stella while the monster chases him. Stella ends up in Sarah's memory. Bellows drags her into the basement, where she meets the girl herself. Sarah suggests that Stella hear another story, but instead the girl suggests that she listens to it herself. She accuses Sarah of going from being a victim to a monster and taking her friends. She tells her that even though her family members were horrible people, Sarah is the only one to blame for all the horrible things she did to her friends. Stella promises to tell her true story. The ghost gives her a pen. Stella pricks her finger and writes that Sarah Bellows is not guilty. Stella promises her that now she can forget everything. After this, the ghost disappears, as does the monster who has already captured Ramon. Stella leaves the cellar and they leave the house together. She writes the true story about Sarah and wins first place in a literature contest for it. Ramon leaves town. The girl is convinced that Augie and Chuck can be brought back with the help of the book. She just needs to figure out how to do it. That's all for now. Thank you all for watching. Which movie retelling would you like to see next? Let me know in the comments. See you.